If you've been listening carefully to the exchange I had with Black Pigeon Speaks on morning, you may remember the name of A N Wilson being a book that Felix read, said he had read. He recommended it to me. I haven't actually read it yet, but I've got Grok's summary of it. And without reading the Grok summary to you, I will explain what I understand it to be saying. So, A. N. Wilson's book, Paul the Apostle, was about Paul being the creator of Christianity because of because of what he said in the Pauline epistles. And A. N. Wilson at the time was going through an atheist phase. His book was controversial. His conclusions were not quite accepted. But it doesn't really matter in that whatever the stories were, true or untrue, the fact remains that Christianity is idolatry, and all this nonsense about looking up obscure stories and arguing about them and whether biblical sources should be taken as true or whether Roman records should be taken as true, and they are irrelevant fundamentally, because you can just cut the crap with concentrating minds on whether Christianity is idolatry. And once you've established that it is, then it doesn't matter what form Christianity took, because it was based on something that is a lie and blasphemy. So those of you who have been paying attention to what I've been saying about Christianity, it is that it is idolatry, and the reason for the Trinity, which is really a dogma that requires Christians to believe that Jesus is God, co-equal, co-substantial, and co-eternal with God and the Holy Spirit. You have to believe in that in order to be Christian, in just the same way that you have to believe in reincarnation to be a Buddhist. It's just not going to be any arguments about it. If you either believe it or you don't. And if you don't believe in it, then you're not properly a Buddhist. So you're not properly a Christian if you don't believe in the divine nature of Jesus, or can't bring yourself to agree with the Nicene Creed. So this is the first stop. And the quickest way to establish it is to ask the two other Abrahamic religions whether they agree or not. And we already know that Jews have been hated by Christians because Christians could never work out why Jews refused to convert to their wonderful religion of worshipping an executed blasphemer. And I guess Jews were too terrified of telling Christians what they really thought about their religion of worshipping an executed blasphemer. What about Muslims? Well, Muslims have rather less excuse in that they have been ignoring a clear commandment of Allah in chapter 18, verse 4, that commands them to admonish those who claim that God has begotten a son. In my view, Muslims have even less of an excuse to not be pointing out to Christians that Christianity is idolatry. Jews, being only 1% of the total human population, will always have the excuse of them being small in numbers to say, well, we just don't want to get ourselves killed by those Christians who have been known to burn heretics at the stake. Well, you could say, well, the First Amendment now gives you the right to deny the Trinity and talk about these matters, and you could say that the European Convention of Human Rights, I think it's Article, what article is it? 2 or 3, I think. European Convention of Human Rights, freedom of expression. Article 10. So technically, Jews in Europe have the right to say that Christianity is idolatry and blasphemy. Why don't they? Probably because they just can't take it seriously enough to kick up a fuss about it. And this neatly brings us to the fate of hypocrites after they die. According to the Quran, it says they are going to the worst place and not the better place. So what are we to make of these narratives? Well, we either take them seriously or we don't. We would take them seriously if we believed in God, and we would dismiss them if we don't. So what explains the complete silence of all these Jews, Christians, and Muslims? Well, quite a few of them, and quite a few of them do claim to believe in God, but they just won't engage on the subject. Is it through ignorance or cowardice? I don't know, but I shall continue to make my point that most of people who claim to be Jews, Christians, and Muslims will be going to hell because they are obviously hypocrites if God exists, and will make good his threat in the Quran about hypocrites going to hell. What does this do with Andrew Wilson? Well, we know that over the years he has changed his mind about believing God or not believing in God, but he calls himself an Anglican, and by this definition, we are supposed to take it that he does believe in God and that he is Christian and he does worship the Trinity. Although this is just an assumption. Many people claim to be Christian, well, obviously not believing in God, because they want to cling to their tribal or class identity of being middle class and white, and they see religion as maybe the final frontier. But let us examine Andrew Wilson's article in the Spectator yesterday to do with lesbian archbishops. So the title is sorry, it's not the Spectator, it's the Sri Lanka Guardian, and it's from his Times article, because it ends in courtesy the Times UK. So it comes under the heading of the human rights section of the Sri Lanka Guardian, and the title is Lesbian Archbishop Breaks Anglican Barrier. Appointment of Cherry Van may upset conservative Christians, but could create positive change in the struggling C of E, says the, it says a description of the article. Now, I should read it through because I think a lot of terms are not quite easily understood. So I'll try and make sense of it for you. This is a story of the immortal diamond, the cherry on the Knickerbocker glory of Anglicanism. Wilson begins. I think he's being ironic here. The Anglican Church in Wales has just elected its new primate. This is the Bishop of Monmouth, the Right Reverend Cherry Van, 66. She has a nice face, and all decent people surely wish her well. Part of the interest in the story is that Van has a civil partner of long standing called Wendy Diamond. She has told interviewers that from discovering her own sexuality, it took her 20 years to tell her parents she was gay. If we went back in a time machine even 30 years, most people, liberal or conservative, would have found this story incomprehensible. A woman who is not merely a priest but an archbishop, and one who is openly gay. And there will be many today who consider it a sign that the Anglican communion has gone bonkers. But as the interminable process of selecting a new Archbishop of Canterbury grinds on, Van's appointment gives those of us who care about the survival of the Anglican Church much to ponder, not least because among those thought to be the bookies' favourite for the role is a woman, the Right Reverend Guli Francis Takani, the Iranian-born Bishop of Chelmsford, and as far as I know, straight. So Wilson is making the point that a heterosexual woman already a bishop could have been made the Archbishop of Wales. Sorry, I should call it the Bishop of Monmouth. But this option was not taken. Instead, they preferred a lesbian with a civil partner. Some time ago, Rose Hodson Wilkin, the Bishop of Dover, and a former chaplain to the Speaker of the House of Commons, declared that those Anglicans who were unable to accept the ordination of women should be forced to do so. This intolerant viewpoint wants to abolish a wonderfully Alice in Wonderland provision that allows a compromise for those who do not believe in female ordination. This reminds me of the story of the cult of the Vestal Virgin, which is obviously an ancient Roman cult. And the interesting thing about it is that when it started, only women who were aristocrats could join. And of course, they had to be a virgin. And you could, as a Vestal Virgin, be married because I think it was some kind of finishing school or something for aristocratic Roman women. After been through the, if you'd been a Vestal Virgin, you would be considered to be marriageable. People would still marry you, though I suppose you might be a little old, but it could be men who didn't care very much for procreation. I am obviously not an expert on ancient Roman history, gleaning most of my knowledge from Wikipedia entries. But the story is that later in the imperial decay of Rome, the Vestal Virgins were in such decline that you no longer had to be aristocratic nor a virgin to join the to become a Vestal Virgin. And this is a story that reading this story of the Church of England made me think of this particular story about how our standards have lowered. And of course, it was a Roman who said, "O tempora, O mores," complaining about the times and the terrible manners and degeneracy of Roman morality. Well, reading between the lines, I think you may just be able to detect a certain tone of disapproval here from Wilson. To continue, these parishes have their own provincial episcopal visitors, otherwise known as flying bishops, who have not ordained women and who are therefore invited to ordain these parishes priests and conduct their confirmation services. The parishioners believe themselves, as Anglicans have traditionally believed, to be part of one holy Catholic and apostolic church, and their bishops are therefore just as much bishops as those of the Orthodox churches or the great Church of Rome. It may well be the case that the majority of Christians in the world, Catholic and Orthodox, are the inheritors of a tradition that is patriarchal, if not actually misogynistic. Sorry, I've lost my place. But this is where they are. And as far as promoting the gospel of Christ is concerned, it is surely better for Christians, despite all their unhappy divisions of the past, to stand together. It is on this basis that traditionalist Anglicans objected to the ordination of women, and it was for this reason that the synod allowed them to have flying bishops who were able to dissociate themselves from the mainstream progressive worldwide Anglican acceptance of women priests and bishops. Christ founded his church on a rock, but the Church of England, in reality more the creation of Elizabeth I and her father Henry VIII, was founded on fudge. Catholic-minded Christians snared the sacraments with Protestants and with the wishy-washies in between. You did not notice the extent of the fudge so long as the differences between them were as esoteric as what happened in the Eucharist, whether the bread was or was not the body of Christ. But whether the priest at the altar is or is not a woman is usually a matter of indisputable fact. Hence, civil war in the Anglican ranks. If the Bishop of Dover had a way with the diehards, among them the most faithful of priests and most devout of congregations would be driven out to Rome or the wilderness. This would surely be sad and unnecessary, because to be Anglican should involve learning how to live with fudge and, like Pascal, to believe in two totally contradictory things at once. The writer Rose Macaulay, a great Anglican, wrote that no church could ever be as true as the Roman Catholics believe their church to be true. That is why many Anglicans, myself included, see no reason to make up our minds about the thorny question of female ordination. We can see that both sides in this debate are right. The traditionalists are right to want to hold on to the historic claims of their episcopate. The progressives, however, are also right, so very right, to say not only that our perceptions of human character and human sexuality have changed, but that a great deal of what was considered morality in the past was not merely wrong, it was a hypocrisy, a denial of what was real. Jesus never mentioned homosexuality, as far as we know, and he was on record as having scandalized even his own disciples by valuing women who were considered outsiders. The Syrophoenician mother who wanted crumbs from the master's table, the widow and her mite, the Samaritan woman at the well, the woman of the town who bathed his feet and hair with her tears. All highly subversive stories. But what does it matter what Jesus said after God has spoken? And did he not speak to humanity and through the Torah? And if you don't quite accept the harshness of the 36 capital offenses for Jews in the Torah, then there is the Judaism light of Islam. Since nothing in Christian scripture was by Jesus, why should anyone attempt to follow a scripture written by nobody who was God? It makes no sense. To continue, scholarship is divided on the subject of whether the early Christians had women ministers. My hunch is that the women who ran some of St. Paul's city churches in Corinth and Thessalonica probably did preside at the Eucharist, but who knows? Well, the point is that there is a Pauline epistle that does say that women should remain silent in church. Let me just check for you which Pauline epistle contains this warning. Yes, it does say in 1 Corinthians, let women be silent in the churches. To continue, the more immediate question is, what does the Church of today say about the love of God in Christ? Does it say grudgingly that God is prepared to overlook the supposed and inescapable fault, in quotes, of being gay, being a sexual being, being a human being? Or does it embrace the exciting possibility that women who have kept the church going for the past 2,000 years might actually be just as capable of exercising priesthood as men? We must not forget, or we should be informed if we did not previously know this, that Wilson has 2 daughters. I think three daughters, 2 by his first wife and 1 by his second wife. So I don't think he will be saying anything that might be contrary to, that might upset any feminist. And we can expect all his 3 daughters to be feminists, I think. Let us read this quite interesting paragraph again. The more immediate question is, what does the Church of today say about the love of God in Christ? Well, if you were not Christian, you could say, what does God's law say? Instead of all these spare words. How would we know what was God's law other than through referring to Scripture? And we already know that Christian Scripture just doesn't mention anything written by God. The New Testament is entirely written by mortal and fallible men. And Jesus was not one of them. Does it say, grudgingly, that God is prepared to overlook the supposed and inescapable, quote, fault, unquote, of being gay, being a sexual being, being a human being? It says nothing of the sort. The New Testament says nothing of the sort. And that's why it is useless as a document to guide us in our exercise of obeying God's law. There's no point looking at the New Testament because it doesn't contain the directly revealed word of God. It's only hearsay and reported speech, reported by mortal and fallible men. To continue, or does it embrace the exciting possibility that women who have kept the church going for the past 2,000 years might actually be just as capable of exercising priesthood as men? What does it mean that women have kept the church going for the past 2,000 years? I believe Wilson means that by producing Christian children, they have assisted, they have kept the church going. Because, obviously, if you have no Christians being born, then, well, that's the end of your religion. In any case, while there is as far as I know, nothing in the Old Testament that says women shouldn't speak in places of religious worship. The Quran says nothing about women having to keep quiet in any place of religious worship. And what does it mean by that? Well, women are now known to read in church and preach in church. It can only mean that women are not allowed to become priests. And Jews would even agree, well, the Orthodox Jews would not agree with rabbis being female. To continue, this is why my heart leapt with joy when I read the promotion of Cherry to the primacy of Wales. Of course, as in almost all stories about Anglicanism, there is an element of comedy in the parable of the cherry and the diamond. But it is surely an indication of the kind of role Anglicanism can play in public life from now on, in an age when it looks highly unlikely that it will ever revive in huge numbers. So he's saying that Anglicanism is a farce. Finally, in his final paragraph, he says, as a churchgoer, I do not absolutely insist that the next Archbishop of Canterbury should be a lesbian, though I would much prefer it if she were. That's accelerationism for you, isn't it? If not a lesbian, he continues, then let us have someone who realizes the potential in the role. That is not to shore up the establishment, but to prod it from inside and without. Yes, I do think he ends on an accelerationist mode, which means that just do your worst. If you decide to conduct human sacrifices, all kinds of abominations, carry on to bring about the end of Anglicanism, because it no longer serves any purpose. If religion were intended to serve any purpose, it would be to support the practice of marriage. But if you're letting what people who are considered to be sex offenders by God in the Torah and the Quran, if you're promoting them to these senior positions, then it's clear you don't have a religion that supports marriage. In fact, you have a religion that utterly undermines marriage. And for our survival as a society and a nation, we should have a think about what kind of religion we want. For people in the chat, thank you for coming. Mike Malzahn asks a question. Yes, you can say that under secular Quranism. Yep, so you can say that. But do not forget that provocation is a partial defense to the crime of murder. I don't know why you say I hate gay people. I don't. I'm just reading an article about what Andrew Wilson said about the female Bishop of Monmouth. I can only acknowledge the existence of God's word forbidding same-sex sex. And obviously this is what the article's all about, right? Aren't I getting the 2 billion Muslims on my side? Well, I've been trying to do that. It's just that, Muslim morons are just not able to understand my message. They're not able to understand that, however, whatever they think of the Jews not following their own religion, neither have they been following their own religion. All these, Islamic scholars, they don't really seem to have, any kind of awareness of chapter 18, verse 4. And I asked them, I belabor the point, I do, and it hasn't made any kind of an impression at all. One of the verses these Muslims don't like about their own book is chapter 17, verse 104, as well as chapter 17, verse 111. It seems that when you point something out to people that they don't like, they just don't acknowledge it, or they instantly forget, and then next time you have to start all over again, and they go, oh yes, oh, what was that verse again? I don't remember you saying that. So I'm finding it quite hard, but I think if you understand what I'm trying to do, you wish to support my mission, then you could be doing the same thing with Muslims. couldn't you? They're not following their own rules. They clearly don't understand how they've gone wrong. Well, thank you for acknowledging that I don't hate gay people, and Vincent Bruno, my streaming partner, is one of them. Perhaps I should ask him to come along. I haven't spoken to him in a while. Last time I did it, he was on holiday in this gay resort. Maybe he'll come on. I think he's coming. Okay, I will just say before we leave this. Oh, good. Vincent is here. So I'm saying we have an accelerationist Anglican, and that's how bad things are. He does want it to crash and burn now. Hi, Vincent. I can't hear you. But we'll wait for you to get your audio together. Yes,
okay, right?
I can hear you now.
Okay, you can hear me now. Hold on one second. Hold on, wait. I have to go out and come back in.
Alrighty. Yeah, I think I've said all I wanted to say on the subject. So when Vincent returns again, we can discuss what he wants to discuss. Anglican accelerationism. Hello.
Hi, why are there two of me?
I don't know.
That's odd.
Shall I remove the other one?
I guess. Yeah, I guess put in real Vincent Bruno, not the other Vincent Bruno.
Yes, he's gone now.
Okay.
How have you been?
Oh, I've been good, though it's a little bit hard to hear you. Talk a minute. Let me hear you.
Testing 1, 2, 3. Testing 1, 2, 3.
It's okay. I guess it's okay. I can hear what you're saying. It's a little bit muffled, but I can still hear what you're saying. It's fine. I think it's my headset. I don't think it's you.
Yeah. Well, maybe you were hearing me better when there were two of you.
No, I can hear you fine when my headsets are off. I just prefer to talk on my headsets, but sometimes they give me problems and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
So, what did you start the stream for? Anglican, who's A N Wilson claims to approve of what?
Of lesbian bishops in Wales, archbishops in Wales. Okay, I mean, I was talking to Black Pigeon Speaks on Saturday, and he left me with this book recommendation about the Apostle Paul, and so I, obviously I didn't read the book, but I got Grok to summarize it for me, and then and I googled his name, and then I found this article published in the Sri Lankan Guardian. So I was actually a bit puzzled. I didn't think the Sri Lankan Guardian would be interested in Anglican affairs, but it's quite a long, involved article about you know gay rights and lesbian archbishops. Oh,
Yes, I'm sorry.
oh,
Hold on
oh,
1 second. Can you hold 1 second?
sure. What is clearly a demon, not hiding what? Welcome, welcome, six live viewers. You're very welcome. So this man, A N Wilson, has been, well, he went through a atheist period of life, and then he claimed to believe in God, and now he wants, reading between the lines, for the Anglican Church to just do its worst and get itself destroyed after, being
Hello?
increasingly perverse. Yes. Hi, Vincent.
Who's clearly a demon and not hiding it?
Well, I'm actually asking this person what they mean. It's annoying when people just don't have subjects and verse and verb in their articles, and you're not really sure what they're referring to. And sometimes when you ask them, like, what were you talking about when you said this? Oh, I can't remember now. So they don't even know what they're talking about.
No, I know. Some of them just don't make sense. I know. They say things that don't make sense and they can't explain themselves, and it's it's definitely annoying.
Well, it's just a sign of mental illness, and it's just spreading like wildfire. And lately I've just come to the conclusion that the reason why there is no common sense is because there is no common belief system. Because if you did have a common belief system, then you would you'd agree. Oh, okay, you'd have a common belief system. You would have you share the same values, and you would agree to the same rules. And since we're all 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 eccentric people living in our own universes, we will just never agree about anything, including solutions to urgent problems.
Well, no, most people can agree to natural laws, like we said. Most people agree to no murder, no theft, because, obviously nobody needs to teach you to protect your family, or nobody needs to teach you to, protect yourself. People naturally do that. And nobody needs to teach us empathy. People naturally have empathy for each other. And so they don't want to murder or kill from each other, and they know they don't want to be murdered or killed. And so there are certain things that we can, that humans naturally agree on.
Yeah, but what about Gaza, though? There are quite a lot of people who say, well, I'm glad they're getting killed. Who wants them?
Well, war is always a little bit different than regular murder, isn't it? I mean, war has always been considered not murder.
Yes. But I suppose, I mean, if you look at the situation in the Middle East, it's like it's where all the Abrahamic religions come from, and therefore it's really a religious war. But even the Iranians say, oh, we're not calling it a religious war. But then I think Iran, because it's an empire and has different religious groups in it, they don't want to say that, because then everybody will start getting upset and maybe even killing each other. But um, you know, I think, because it is a religious war, it needs a theological solution. And increasingly, more and more people are taking an interest in theology, which is, I guess, helpful, even though, they can't seem to agree uh, on idolatry. But then, even though, even people not taking it seriously is kind of evidence of their atheism.
Well, only Abrahamics who don't take it seriously. I mean, if you don't
Well,
think
they're
there's
supposed to
anything,
take it seriously, of all people. You can't expect, Hindus and Buddhists to take, idolatry seriously. I mean, when their whole religion is idolatry.
well, what I'm saying is that, just, for an idol worshiper, that doesn't mean just because you're an idol worshiper doesn't mean you don't believe in God. But yes, if you're a Muslim and you're not taking it very seriously, then obviously you don't fear the God that much. And, you're more likely to be caring what other people think rather than what Allah wants.
Yeah, but I mean, I've sort of worked out, how the whole system is supposed to work. Even this sort of parable. I think parable of what Jesus said. I think it was him. He said, "No man can serve two masters." That was him, wasn't it?
Well, yeah, but I don't even necessarily agree with that. I mean, you can be the slave to a man and his mistress. If you were a household servant, either one of them was in control of you. I don't necessarily believe that you can have more than one master in this world. Yeah, you can.
But I think what is meant is that you will get these two masters to um, um, to make you, to create a situation of a conflict of interest. I think you can imagine, parents when they fight and they ask a child what they think about this or that, and the child is in conflict, and that
I
is.
know, but you still have two masters who are your parents. You can serve both your parents. I mean, sometimes there's going to be conflict, but you know what I mean? Are there periods of time where you can obey both of them? Yes. I mean, they might be in unison on what they want. Generally, it doesn't break down families just because you have two masters. It doesn't break down the family.
But family feuds do happen when that there's some irreconcilable difference, and then you have these family feuds, and people not talking to each other. But okay, what I'm trying to say is that I think it ultimately hinges on whether people agree, can accept that God is logical, because I think a lot of people think of God as immoral and illogical, and that's why they reject him, I guess.
Well, I told
Well,
you
you're one of them.
if you add a bunch of fake history and fake, then they're just not going to take it very seriously. Nobody's going to take this very seriously, especially if you take these things literally. If you take the Bible literally the way I was taught, then most people are not going to take it very seriously.
Um, what do you mean to take it literally? You mean
Like
believing,
there's
all the
actually,
stories?
yeah, all the stories, they actually happened. It's actual history. If you're teaching people things if you're going to people and saying, my religion teaches this nonsense, well, then they're not going to very likely believe the rest of it.
Okay. I mean, you could actually say that the stories are not may or may not be true, because you can't prove that Jonah would have survived in the belly of a whale, blah blah blah. And these stories are only to make a point, because somehow you can only make a point to uneducated people through stories, and that there's no, you can't get through to them in writing a philosophical essay at those times. So you have to.
I know. I think that the Greeks did a very good job at spreading philosophy. I think that those people were backward and were backward, stupid, primitive people. And yes, they needed a backward, stupid, primitive, backward religion that would, tell them nonsense. But as soon as you get out of that area and people start becoming a little bit more educated, then that's going to collapse. I mean, if all your population is illiterate, then you can tell them anything. But as soon as you start educating them, they're going to start abandoning your religion, just like they're doing in Saudi Arabia.
Okay, so, but we're still talking about the Abrahamic God, but nobody talks about Jews like they're stupid, do they? So even though they seem to
But
be...
there's so many atheist Jews because they don't really take the religion very seriously because it's hard to take seriously. It's if especially if you're in these Orthodox, and you're not allowed to learn about dinosaurs and things like that. Of course, you're going to start questioning that if you have any intelligence.
I don't think believing in God is necessary.
Believing in those things, I didn't say
okay,
believing in God.
Okay,
but nobody's going to believe that is God if you have to believe a bunch of rubbish. Look, if I was taught that I had to believe that humans are only 7,000 years old, that's garbage. That's garbage.
Yeah, but that's not one of the pillars of belief, right?
Okay, yes, it is. Yes, you have to believe that. Yes, if you're not believing that,
where does
then...
it say that?
Okay, well, that's what they teach, and that's what they want you to
No,
believe.
look at the 13 principles of Judaism.
I'm not talking about them. I'm talking about what I was raised on. But also, some Jews do teach their children. Yes, there's Jews who teach their children that we're only in the 7,000 year of human history. Nobody's going to believe that. Who's educated? No educated person is going to believe that. Or that. Why can't I learn about dinosaurs? I remember watching a program on Hasidic Jews, and they taught her from home, and she wasn't allowed to learn about dinosaurs.
Okay, but it's only a Christian thing. I mean,
that was Jewish. No, she was an Orthodox Jew. You weren't allowed to learn about dinosaurs in her Orthodox Jewish upbringing, and so she left because, she said, "Why are you hiding information from me?" So if you do things like that, people won't take your religion very seriously.
Well, I suppose it was a shock to Victorians when Darwin proposed his theory, but there was obviously a first man and woman, right?
But where they didn't come from, they're not 7,000 years old. Human history is 10, 20, 30, 40, 81,000 years old. It's not, or 100,000 years old. It's not 7,000 years old.
I know, but the Quran doesn't actually,
Okay, but it also says that Adam and Eve that were created, and a talking snake, and waters, divided, and all of this other rubbish that nobody who has any kind of education is going to take very seriously, or anyone who has any IQ is going to take very seriously. And people are going to start questioning this.
Yes, of course, but how do you think they're going to convey all these, this...
Well, the Greeks did it.
God, it can't be done through philosophical essays.
Well, some other cultures
I know you say
did
you
do
don't
philosophical
care, and
essays.
you wish it never.
I'm just saying that. All I'm saying is that no one's going to take your God very seriously for very long if you add a bunch of mumbo jumbo in there.
Well, the stories aren't mumbo jumbo.
Yes, it is mumbo jumbo. None of that stuff happened. None of it happened.
I call mumbo jumbo stuff that people don't even believe in, like the Latin Mass, and people who don't like hearing the prayer said in their own language.
Okay, magic, talking snakes, talking donkeys, all this stuff is nonsense.
They are stories designed to make a point. I mean, do we have to?
Okay, but that you're supposed to take these
Aesop's fable to get the point.
This is new. This is neo. You're in this neo. All these Muslims and Jews and Christians want to pretend that throughout all of history nobody took these books very seriously, and that everyone just
that they don't.
People, Muslims 100 years ago took the Quran seriously. They didn't say, "Oh, but this never happened." They didn't teach their children that these things never happened. They didn't teach them that.
The most important thing is whether or not you believe in God and the afterlife. I mean, it's just been reduced to that.
Okay, Claire, but people want
to do with flying.
Okay, well, how dare you? Okay, so you're gonna lie. You're gonna lie to me about history, and then I'm supposed to believe you about the afterlife? That's not a very confidence building exercise.
What bit of history are you saying is a lie?
Well, I don't know about the Quran, but in the Bible, it's all historical fallacy, and then it's all fallacy, and
Which
then
one? Which bit?
okay, well, obviously Jonah was never in the stomach of a whale, and the Nile never parted ways, and all this other kind of stuff never happened, and
Well, you were
I don't.
never there, so
Okay, well, it's never happened it's impossible to happen. It's never happened. No one's ever witnessed this. People for centuries have tried practicing magic. It said Moses turned rods into snakes and all this other kind of stuff. These have never been accomplished in reality. All of it is
okay.
fairy
So
tales.
are you saying that Aesop's fables serve no purpose? Because obviously,
Well,
these
if something's
animals
called a
couldn't speak
fable,
to
there's a
each
difference.
other.
It's different if something's openly called a fable versus called history. Those are two different things. If you're required to believe these things actually happen, then it's not going to last forever. That's not a long lasting, forever lasting, into the educated era religion.
Well, for every system of belief, including communism, fascism, blah blah, whatever, if you're an anti-Semite, you're required to believe that Jews are responsible for all your misfortunes, or if you're a Nazi, if you're there's certain ideologies and belief systems that require you to believe in a certain thing, and if you can't
Okay, but
believe
that's
in
not
it,
based in
then you're not part of it.
that's not based in faith, that's based in observation. People who dislike Jews observe something about them they dislike. I mean, I don't agree with they dislike Jews because they're so liberal, but you know what I mean? That's what they're observing, and that's a reality. Yes, probably 80% of Jews in America vote Democrat, probably something like that.
Okay, but what I meant is that people who take a position on these things kind of have to go through with the whole thing. So, for example, in order to say that we don't need God to create the universe, we would have to rely on the position that the universe was always there and didn't need God to create it. And obviously these things are we cannot have any proof of it because we were not there at the beginning of time when the universe began to exist, or whatever. So we support these positions because we want to ignore the laws of God, or we want to follow the laws of God. And then if we want to follow the laws of God, we have to believe in God. But if we want to ignore
What God? I'm not going to believe in a God that. Okay, if somebody comes to me with a bunch of false information and then says this is God, I'm not going to believe them.
But I'm saying it's a very political position to take, to believe or disbelieve. So
Okay, but you could
these
believe in
different
God, but not that
narratives.
God. You could believe in God, but not that God, not the God of the Quran. You can believe in God. You can
Okay,
believe in
so what is this God you believe in that isn't the
Okay, well,
Abrahamic God?
I'm saying you can believe in a God that maybe you can't. Okay, what if you're the type of person who says, "Well, I do believe in God, but God is so supreme that I don't know that much about him, but I do know that there are certain rules that keep civilization going, and you can have hope in a good God and all these different kinds of things, and you can hope that God doesn't like murder and theft and things like that. It depends. It depends on the believer. I mean, but okay, somebody might believe in some other monotheistic deity. I mean, there were other monotheistic religions that were around in pagan times. Not all of them were polytheistic. And, you know, there were probably people who didn't believe in them too because it was full of nonsense.
Well, okay, if we want to go to, if you want to consider monotheism, then the only disagreement amongst monotheists is that God is not what you think he is, good or evil or whatever.
Yeah,
So
they're going to disagree, but I'm not going to listen to someone who comes to me with a book full of fallacious, nonsense and listen to them. I was reading the Quran. I'm going to read the Quran because you keep pestering me to read it, but every other sentence is, if you don't believe this, you're going to hell. If you don't believe this, you're going to hell. If you don't believe this, you're going to hell. Like, that's, it's like, get a life. You're trying to fearmonger me into
Oh
believing.
yes, it's all
No,
about fear.
well,
I mean,
that's
even in the Old Testament, which is more scary than the Quran, I would say. I
okay.
mean,
Well,
the
that's
beginning
not.
of wisdom is fear of the Lord. It's like, yes, you have to fear him.
Well, there wasn't anything in there, especially if you're going to be talking about people living inside the stomachs of whales. I'm not going to, if you don't know what this world is about, then I don't believe you know what the next world is about.
Well, this world is about a lot of people having lots of different stories, right? And
I'm saying if
the
you
more
don't
I talk to
understand the laws
people,
of physics, if you
like,
don't
the
understand,
law, nobody argues. Mind you, they sort of do about climate change and stuff. So,
that's not saying the laws of space-time were broken. I'm talking about, if you're saying the laws of space-time are being broken somewhere, then you don't understand how this universe works.
well, has anybody claimed that the laws of space-time have been
Yes,
broken?
by the Nile River parting and someone living in the stomach of a whale for 9 days or whatever it was. Yes, so that's not science.
Well, it could have been a tidal wave or something. I've read that there were theories about the parting of the Red Sea at a
That's
certain
not
time.
what the Bible said. The Bible said that God spread the sea apart for them and they traveled through it, and that when the Egyptians went to go follow them, the sea collapsed back in on itself. There was no tidal wave. There was none of this kind of stuff.
Okay, well, obviously I don't know, but what I'm trying to say is that
This is all new confangled things that nobody believed in 100 years ago, that modern Muslims, Christians, and Jews come up with. Like, oh, Adam and Eve were just evolutionary cells. Like, that's ridiculous. That's not what the Bible was saying.
well, I mean, the story of Adam and Eve is really, men and women blaming each other, right?
Okay, but well, that's a bad story to build your civilization on. But
But you should be on notice that there will always be blaming each other, and there will be a gender war that you can only contain by obeying the laws of God, that kind of thing. Because ultimately, it's about the laws being fair enough, right? Because I think what's driving people crazy is how the laws keep changing, and nobody knows what it is anymore. It's changing so fast, and ditto our leaders. We don't know who they are before they've come and they've gone. And then I think a lot of mental health issues is caused by people not knowing who the hell they are. And I think, well, it's not healthy, is it? Not knowing who the hell you are. And being,
and who is someone who doesn't understand the laws of space-time to tell you who you are? They don't even know how this world works.
About identity, not knowing if you're male or female or gay or straight or Jew or Gentile. And
so you're going to be helped by a gender war, a fake gender war that took place 7,000 years ago. That's going to fix all this for you?
No, I'm saying there is a gender war now.
How are these stories? How is belief in nonsense going to fix knowing who you are? Besides giving, and how is it? I did. That's not going to help anyone. The reason that we're in this is because people rebelled against that. The reason people ran into materialism is because the religion that was given to them was so absurd that it just made them lose faith in God. If you give people absurd religions, they're going to lose faith in religion.
Well, I don't think it's that absurd, or that the certainly more absurd religions than the Abrahamic God. I mean, considering, Hinduism.
But
right?
I don't understand. Well, Hinduism is not as, first of all, those mythologies are not necessarily taken as real. And number two.
There you go. It's just a story we tell children. Like the Greek myths. But okay, the main point is that the okay, in theory, there is a God that knows our minds and our hearts and can do anything. And obviously, this idea, whether God exists or not, is extremely attractive to people for all kinds of
Okay, but you
reasons.
don't need to, if it's attractive, don't throw shit in there to turn people off. Okay, the concept, yes, the concept of God is attractive. I understand that. But you don't want to make people leave God by adding a bunch of nonsense in there that nobody's going to take seriously.
Well, people just make up stories, so you need to be able to separate the chaff from the wheat, don't you? Of course we do. Because there's so many narratives and so much information, and people want you to believe all kinds of things for their own, quite often malign reasons,
Okay, well,
because they
just
want
give
to
them a
trick
narrative
you.
that's not, I mean, if you could rewrite the Bible and actually make it real history and not add all this nonsense and, mystical, magical, illogical, these kinds of things, if you could have just removed it and given a real history of what really happened, then maybe people would take it more seriously.
But all these stories, they illustrate some moral, just like Aesop's fable. So okay, Jonah, whom you scorn, it's not really about him being in the stomach of the whale. It's a fact that he didn't want to preach to the Ninevites, and he was sent there in the end, and then he preached to them, and they repented, and he was still angry.
Okay, well, this
And
never happened. This is not a real story that ever happened, or, it doesn't, it's not going to convince you to get up and work for God if you're just being told stories that never
okay,
really happened.
what would convince you?
What would convince me? Well, I guess maybe if there was a book full of real history that, unlocked secrets of the universe and stuff like that, maybe that would be a little bit more. I might not jump into that cult, but I might be a little bit more receptive to it if I didn't have to believe in nonsense. Like I'm a little bit more receptive to Matilda Ludendorff because I don't have to believe in demons or angels or any of that kind of stuff. And also, the laws of space time are never broken. She said there's no miracles. She preached no miracles, which is a lot more sound philosophy than miraculous magical thinking.
Yeah, but nobody believes in her belief system.
Well, first of
So
all,
what's the
people
point? What's the
do.
point that
No,
nobody
but
wants
people
it?
wait. First of all, people do. Secondly, people believe in her belief system in that they, number one, believe the laws of space time can't be broken. So yes, there are people who believe in her belief system. Maybe not
Well,
fully,
what
but
racist? I mean, white
what?
supremacists.
No, lots of people believe space time can't be broken. Not just racists. Lots
No,
of
but
people
but
believe.
but her thing is
Okay, I'm saying
we're special and protected
aspect,
because we're white.
in that aspect, in that aspect, people do believe in her philosophy, not the whole thing entirely, but she has a Schopenhauer ideology about God, I guess. I mean, you know what I mean? It's people believe in aspects of her philosophy, yes, maybe not wholesale, but aspects of it, yes. There's like some people believe only in.
What does Schopenhauer to do with her?
Well, she had the same vision of God or whatever, that you don't know what's outside space time. So it's not fair to say there's a personal God out there enforcing his will upon the planet. You don't know that. So just don't bother saying things like that, is basically what she said. She said, don't make things up about outside space time because it's the acausal realm and you don't know what's going on there. You can't even comprehend it. So how dare you say there's a personal God out there that's enforcing his will and has all these rules and laws when you don't know of the acausal realm. It's the acausal realm. It doesn't even make sense. If we lived in an acausal realm, then every time you put your hand in fire, sometimes it would burn you, sometimes it wouldn't, sometimes it would be cold, sometimes it would be hot. Nothing would make sense if we lived in an acausal world. So it's beyond your comprehension. So just focus about what's going on in this planet, inside space-time, God inside space-time, and one of the things that would help you is to not believe in miracles.
Okay, so I didn't know Schopenhauer was an atheist.
I don't think he was an atheist. I think he just said that. Well, I don't know what I know her God is similar to his. I didn't read about his God. I just read that hers was similar to his, and that God outside space-time is not something to discuss. You don't know what God outside space-time wants. It doesn't even make sense, the causal realm. It doesn't even make sense. So, you're trying to go from a world where you can go left and you actually turn right, or you can go up and you actually go down. That's the world you're trying to make sense out of.
Well, okay, all I'm saying is that you can actually make sense of it because
Of the acausal realm? How do you make sense of the acausal realm?
remind me again, what is the okay? What
means
is
that
it?
nothing follows anything. There's no if this then that. There's no, like I said, it would be like a world where every time you put your hand in fire, you got a different result, some random result. Sometimes it was hot, sometimes it was cold, sometimes it was this, sometimes it was wet, sometimes it was dry. Sometimes it burned, sometimes it didn't. It would just be like
Yeah,
a
but the
world.
physical law are reasonably consistent, right?
I know, but we're in the causal realm and we can make sense of that. You can't make sense of the acausal realm. You can't even make sense of what's going on outside space time. What do you mean there's a personal God out there? I can't even think of that. A personal God in the acausal realm. How would this God even think straight? How would the God ever even accomplish anything if it's acausal? How did he create the universe if the realm is acausal? What do you mean? What mechanism did he use? It makes no
Okay,
sense.
we're not supposed to know.
Okay, how
but
does God even
okay,
think? Tell
okay.
me,
What?
explain to me how God even thinks without cause and effect. How does God even think? How does one thing precede the other? How does anything even make
I
sense
think
out
I
there?
think you're just getting the complete wrong end of the stick.
No,
The whole
this
idea of
is
the
what people are
Abrahamic.
going to ask.
Okay, so
You're
you're not even allowing me to speak now because you just don't want to hear it, right?
no, well, you're not going to have an answer because there's no way to interpret the
Yeah, because
acausal
nobody
realm.
gets a causal realm thing. But what I'm saying is that you cannot conclusively deny the existence of God, nor can you
I
conclusively prove the
didn't. I
existence
just said I
of God.
don't know. I'm not going to make things up about it because I can't understand it.
Okay, but what you can still make sense of it because you can observe
How?
these people who claim to have this religion or that religion, and unfortunately, there are only 5 world religions, and we don't need to consider
That has nothing to do with telling people what's outside space time. And just because something works doesn't mean that it's right. Yeah, the power of positive thinking works. Like if you wake up every day and think to yourself that nothing can hurt you, then you're going to be less depressed. But you have to deal with the fact that you need to ignore facts. You need to ignore when bad things happen to you. You just need to ignore it and make up an excuse about why this bad thing happened to you. And it had nothing to do with,
it's
when
a
you're positive.
survival strategy. So I
Okay,
don't know
but your power
why
of
you're so
positive
against
thinking,
optimism.
was supposed to
Well, it's
exonerate
worked for
you from
Trump.
bad things.
Well, it's worked for Trump. So if we're going to just go on being negative, then I guess we'll just kill ourselves and never do
No, but
anything.
also it didn't really work. All these bad things happened to him, but he just doesn't think about it. He doesn't.
Well,
Okay,
good.
Trump.
So he has a good
No,
attitude,
no, but
it's
Trump
probably
does
helped
not.
him succeed.
Trump, yeah, I know, but that doesn't mean it's true. Just because you think bad things can't happen to you
It's
doesn't
too
mean they
early to
can't.
tell, right?
No,
It's too
okay,
early to tell about.
so you believe that if someone believes bad things can't happen to them, then they won't happen to them.
No,
Okay, well that's the
but
power
bad
of
things
positive
do
thinking.
happen, but we're supposed to get over it, right?
Okay, it says if God is for me, then who can be against me? Of course people can be against you if God, of course people can be against you. That's a stupid saying. Yes, it might help you to get up in the morning to think that the world can't harm you. And then, yes, and then, it just because it helps you doesn't mean it's real. You have to be delusional. Yes, deluded people are going to be more happy if they have a deluded belief system that makes them feel happy. Yes,
Yes,
but
so you make a point of being an optimist rather than a pessimist because
no,
the
but
whole
I
point
didn't say
of
be an
pessimism
optimist.
is that you'll never try anything because you'll be so afraid.
Power of positive thinking is not about no, power of positive thinking is
Why do you
not
think
about being
nobody's
an
written a book
optimist.
of the power of negative thinking? Hmm?
Well, there is a power of negative thinking in that it's more realistic. And I think
No,
that
it's like gravity. Like nobody sort of isn't it wonderful to be a snail? People want to fly. People want to go, supersonic. People want to go beyond the speed of light. They don't want to think, oh, isn't it great to be a snail?
okay, well, I think that this gives people unrealistic expectations, and also like it makes it, they will glorify things. That's like saying my daughter, was born retarded, but I have the power of positive thinking to think that she's going to be fine. And like some people will be stupid enough to think that, and some people will be deluded enough to think when their daughter is adult and she's still retarded, she's still fine. Everything's fine. She's as great as she could be. It couldn't be better. Like, you know what I mean? Like if you're deluded on that level, then of course you're going to be happy if
Well,
you're that
you
deluded.
can have government policy, or well, if you do have a retard, don't expect
That's not
help
the
from the
point.
taxpayer.
That's not the point. The point is
I mean,
that if
that's a
you
point because otherwise people, oh, but it's my daughter and blah 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 blah.
okay, now the point is that somebody who wakes up every day and thinks their retarded child can be cured is going to be a lot happier than somebody who wakes up every morning and says my child is permanently retarded.
Okay, so they might think, it's my cross to bear, or I'm being punished, or whatever.
No, not. I'm just saying that if you wake up with this unrealistic belief system that when it doesn't come to fruition, you just ignore it, yes, you
Why do
will
you
be
care
happier.
about these people? Leave them to their delusions, but it's still
I
accept
know
that
that was
that
no. The
having a
point was
positive
whether things are
attitude
true or not. What?
lets you do things that you otherwise wouldn't. And a
Okay,
lot of these things are attitudinal problems. People have a bad attitude, so they don't make the best of what they have, and then they'll die, bitter and angry and blaming Jews.
okay. I'm just saying that if look, just because something works doesn't mean that it's reality.
Okay, it
Okay,
doesn't
yes,
matter. Maybe we
okay,
won't know.
okay. If you're
But
if you're
why do you want
if
to get angry with people?
okay, if your child has brain damage, yes. I mean, if you woke up every day and be like, it's all going to be fine and cured, then yeah,
Okay,
you're gonna walk
let
around this
these
world like
people with
hum de
their
dum de
brain
dum de
damaged
dum de
children.
dum. But that doesn't mean it's
Okay,
right.
what do you want them to do? You want them to kill their kid?
No, I'm saying that it's more realistic to think, okay, my child's
Okay,
brain
why do you
damage.
care so much? If people manage to
Well,
get
because
by
you're
with their
trying to make the
brain
point.
burdens,
You're trying to make the point that what works better is true, and I'm saying that's not necessarily the truth.
no, I'm just saying optimism is clearly a survival
That wasn't the
strategy.
point. No, the point was that you're just saying out of the five religions, see what works best. Well, Judaism works better than Islam because there's only like two Jews, and they're able to run circles around 2 billion Muslims. So
Well, okay, I don't think that's the truth. They only appear to be running circles around Muslims because the American empire supports them for its
well,
own
the Muslims weren't
geopolitical
able.
reasons.
Well, the Muslims weren't able to convince anyone to run circles for them in any way
Yeah,
because
because
they're
the
incompetent.
morons and they won't be told and they don't get the difference between a republic and a monarchy and they're too scared to discuss it amongst themselves and they're too intellectually dishonest to want a proper discussion about it. So I guess they're going to crash and burn. But it's obvious what's happened. They can't admit that their crap interpretation of their Quran has caused them to go wrong, and that's why everyone thinks they're backward and primitive.
Um, okay, you can't just go running around woe is me all the time. You have to blame yourself at some point for Muslims are to blame for the fact that Muslims don't have power in the West and didn't get there's 2 billion
Yes,
Muslims in
yes,
this.
I am, trying to make that point. That they can only say, we're the eternal victims of
Okay, well,
Western
where's it? If they've
imperialism.
been doing this forever and ever, I told you, like, the Jehovah's Witness strategy is very well. If you're not getting it done, you're doing it wrong. Like, it's wrong. Like, there's something off here. Like, you know what I mean? Stop doing what you're doing. You have the wrong religion. You have the wrong belief system because the fruits aren't there. So the fruits are not there in Islam. So I don't know who you are to go like touting it like it's the truth when the fruits aren't there.
Well, because I can show where they've gone wrong and what they don't follow and what
Okay,
they
when have they
dare not
ever not gone
discuss.
wrong? When have they ever not gone wrong? You know what I mean? Like you know, it's not okay if you create a system. Look, the Jehovah's Witness system works because no, you can't just be willy-nilly about it. No, you're not born a Jehovah's Witness like in Islam. You're not born a Jehovah's Witness. You have to actually work for that and earn it. So they have a better system that's more cohesive and make sure that it has a proper membership selection system. You know what I mean? I mean, Islam is a religion that you're a Muslim even if you don't take it very seriously. Atheist Muslims, gay Muslims, this is ridiculous stuff.
No, the point is that you can call people out because, in every group that there will be, the purpose of the group or the name of the group and members of the group and the rules of the group. So obviously the people who break the rules are low status and the people who keep the rules are high
Okay, but if you make
status.
the rules too ridiculous and hard, then people don't care if they lose status. So, if you tell people they
Yeah,
can't wear
like
blue, if
Judaism.
you give people, rules like you can't wear blue on Wednesdays, then of course people are gonna, not keep those rules. They're not, or if they're too hard, or if they're too undesirable, or they make people too unhappy,
Like
then
Judaism.
like obviously you have a rule. So well, that's why 90% of Jews don't practice Judaism because it's too saddening. It makes them too unhappy.
Yeah, and also because of Jewish emancipation, um, you know, America and Europe have been, happy to accept them. So
Well, I'm just saying that if you make your religion too difficult and unhappy for people, then it's not a proper religion for the populace.
yeah, and I'm saying that the rules of the Quran are fair enough, but over the
Oh, then
centuries,
why won't anyone keep them? And then why won't any
yeah,
Sharia
because they've
state
got
act?
their hadithic shit, right?
Okay,
Which they won't give
obviously, no,
up.
the proof is in the pudding. Look at the fruits that it's bearing. Nobody wants to do it, so therefore it's too hard.
No, they've accumulated their hadithic shit that they are that is actually more precious to them than the Quran itself. It's easy to prove that.
Okay, well,
Because of
that's
the way
Islam.
they'll just go, oh, you're kafir because you
Well,
don't.
the Quran is not. The Quran is obviously not enough. It doesn't teach you how to pray. It doesn't teach you how to do halal
Okay,
slaughter.
so if you want to pray, just go to the hadith when you want to pray, and then you can pray. But you
Okay,
don't
so
have to
then why?
accept
So you're
all the
so
shit
then.
that comes
Oh,
along
okay,
with
so
it.
then you need hadith for Quran to make sense, but you're not supposed to accept all hadith.
Exactly. You're not supposed to accept all of it because even normative Muslims say, well, not all of it is reliable. And we have chains of
I know,
narration
but
in our own
there
very
are
special
reliable
way of
hadith.
working out which is true and
There are
reliable.
okay. Well, you still okay. Well, I guess your Quranism just sank because there's no way to practice the Quran without the hadith.
No, I can have a rule that says that the hadith should be rejected when it contradicts the Quran.
When does
So
it contradict the Quran?
when it prescribes the execution of apostates, when it prescribes the stoning of adulterers, that kind of thing.
Wait, where did it? Where? Okay, and yes, in the Quran it says to whip fornicators, but I don't know if it specifically said adulteresses. It said,
Well,
I
I mean,
mean, this is
it's just a,
whippings is for fornicators, right? For fornicators.
well, I would say any sex offender
I know,
would.
but actually, if you were a Muslim, isn't technically only for fornicators. So an adulteress, which is different. If the Quran says that this is for fornication, then I guess it is wide open to make a new, prohibition for adultery.
Well, I think it's included illicit sex.
Let's see. Hold on. Let's see what I want to see. What?
Yeah,
Okay.
go to Quran corpus, which is 7 English translations, and then
Yeah,
you'll
hold on. I
appreciate
wanna.
the
I'm gonna
nuance.
ask Rock. I'm gonna ask Rock. I'm gonna ask Rock. Hold on. Oh, I gotta get my computer running.
In the meantime, I'll find out what religion Schopenhauer was. Because I thought he was some kind of Buddhist who said mean things about women.
Okay.
He was an atheist philosopher, but he also engaged with the religious ideas, particularly those of Christianity, Hinduism, and Buddhism. Oh, he's an atheist, so I guess that makes things clear.
Hold on, I'm trying to get this.
Well, he rejected the existence of God and the soul. He found some of their core tenets to contain profound truths, especially in their symbolic representations of suffering and the human condition.
Okay, let me ask. Okay, does the Quran only prohibit fornication and call for the lashing of fornicators, or does this prohibition also include adultery? I am asking this because I want to know if the Hadith, which prescribes stoning for adulteresses, I'm asking this because I want to know if Hadith, which prescribes the stoning of adulteresses, is this a abrogation of the Quran, or is the Hadith in its right to prescribe stoning for adultery because it is not mentioned in the Quran? Okay, let's see what it says. Hold on.
Well, according to Mike Malzahn, 4 people want to come in, and he's asked me to post a link, so I have.
Okay.
Here he is.
Claire,
Hi,
Bruno,
Mike. Hello.
Hi.
how's everybody doing?
We're
Good.
doing our research.
So, well, 24:2, let not compassion with you keep you from carrying out this law of Allah. Lash the fornicator. It depends on the translation again. So, zina, Z-I-N-A, is the Arabic word. It means illegal sexual contact, or
There you go. So it can apply to, men with men, women with women,
it could,
and
but
men and women.
But if you go to the 82nd book of Bukhari, obviously, the punishments of Allah, Omar says, when Muhammad was alive, we stoned adulterers to death, and one guy ran away from the masjid. When the stones troubled him, we chased him down, we beat him to death. So we should do that again.
No.
There's actually a hadith where Omar says, I fear because it was not put in the book of Allah, as in the Quran, that we should stone adulterers, that it would be forgotten. But I did it as the Caliph, the second rightly guided Caliph, and Muhammad did it, and it should be a punishment from Allah. The hudud, you got such a crazy interpretation of Islam. It's
Yeah,
funny.
well, if it's not in the Quran and it contradicts the Quran, I'm not going to impose it. So what's the problem with this,
Well, most Muslims hate Quran alone Muslims to begin
I
with.
don't give a shit what these retards think, right? I just don't.
Okay. Well, you keep shoveling against the tide. I will.
Well, I mean, it's not that
your
Western
train-
governments are going to be mindful of what these Muslim morons say. I mean, they already live under LGBT in the West, so are they going to say, "Oh no, you can't interpret it like this because we interpret it in the other way"? And actually, they can't agree even amongst themselves, even now.
Absolutely, and that's absolutely what they will say.
Yeah,
We're
and you can
interpreting
ignore
it
them.
this way.
You can ignore them, and
Yeah.
which of course you can. Because
Right.
I mean, really, the whole system is, everybody can have their own version of secular Quranism, and obviously, I can't, enforce my interpretation on there. But and if that you do adopt it, then your Supreme Court will be the ultimate arbiter of, how to interpret those principles, and that's how it should have been all along, and that's probably why there's more than one school of Sharia. Vincent, you about to say something?
No, I was just reading this. They said that in the Quran, zina is both fornication and adultery, but later on the Hadith, because the Muslims believed that there was originally, which I don't even know why you would be a Muslim or trust the Quran if you believe this. So this Caliph Umar ibn al-Khattab claimed there was once a Quranic verse prescribing stoning for married adulterers. So I don't know why they believe that, but they believe the Quran has, the Hadith has specified the difference between fornication and adultery under zina. So, I mean, I guess you wouldn't prescribe that, but
no, I'm certainly not proposing to stone adulterers.
Okay, how about why don't we ask? Okay, what aspects of the Muslim religion cannot be known without Hadith and only Quran alone, such as how to, okay, I'm not going to even say that.
Right. Well, I mean, how to pray, I mean, Sunni will argue with the Quran alone guys. Well, you don't know how to pray.
But they already do know how to pray, these Quran people. They just want to make trouble for them and treat them as heretics, so they'll shut up. Right. But actually, the Quran only Muslims won't be able to agree with each other on anything.
So Claire, does the Quran say to pray 3 times a day or 5 times a day?
The verses that say both.
Okay,
so, but I don't care.
Right, but isn't that
self-contradictory?
Why do you want to impose this book as divine revelation on the world if you don't care that it's self-contradictory? Like Vincent was saying earlier, you can't just throw out Jonah and the whale. You can't just throw out jinn. You can't just throw out, the sleepers in the cave. You can't just throw out Gog and Magog.
But no, I've already explained it to you, Mike. You already know I only care about the laws that are capable of being made into legislation. I don't give a crap about the stories or the threats and promises of God.
Right.
I just want the commandments, and I'm going to that can be made into law.
So why not just create your own religion?
No, because people will just say you're just a silly woman. We're not going to, how dare you think you can create a religion for us? Of course, I'm not going to do that.
Well, Mohammed just created a religion. Jesus created a religion. The Zoroastrians, Zorro or whatever, created a religion. The Baha, the Babalu or whatever his name is, he created a religion. L. Ron Hubbard created a religion.
It's too much trouble. It's too much trouble. I think that the obvious thing to do is to rely on the best out of the few that are available to be considered. And as we only have 5, Mike, we only have 5, and Hinduism and Buddhism are not good enough for Orientals. It will definitely not be good enough for Westerners. So forget Hinduism and Buddhism, and most of us are not Jews. So it's a straight race between Christianity and Islam, and that makes it very simple.
Yeah, but the problem is the Muslims aren't going to like your Islam.
I don't give a shit, and nobody cares
Well,
what they
but
think anyway.
aren't you trying to get the people to come on board with you? Right? I mean, isn't that the point of basing it in a point of Islam, is that there's 2 billion Muslims, right? There's 2 billion Christians. We got to get within the Abrahamics, right? You're not willing to say, hey, I got this new religion. I'm going to take these aspects from the old religions that you guys like, and we'll roll it into a new one, and we'll get rid of the stuff you guys don't like.
Yeah, but so
You're just saying.
But Mike, I have been known to be selling this directly to Western governments, and they're not interested because
Exactly.
but the thing is, they're not interested in any solution. They're not interested. So we can deduce from what Western government is doing is that it's actually wants to kill itself and its citizens. It doesn't give a crap. It wants World War III. It really wants suicide by cop, and that's what it's doing, isn't it? I mean, that's the only way to make sense of its policies.
I don't think we're on suicide by cop as a nation. I think we have liberals who think we should just open our borders and let everybody in and spend all this money on the unions and different things. And I think we have Republicans who are like, okay, let's not tax the rich, let them spend all their money on different things, trickle down economics. In fact, I was watching Ross Perot. I don't know if you all are old enough to remember the 92 election. It was pretty funny. When Perot,
I remember the name, but not the details of the election.
When he said, if we pass NAFTA, there'd be a huge sucking sound, jobs going to Mexico. He wanted to put a 50-cent. That's the only reason I voted against him. I thought he made a lot of sense, but he wanted a 50-cent gas tax to reinvest in America, blah, blah, blah. But anyway, I don't think we're on the precipice of collapse like everyone seems to think. That's
okay. Well, some people think Western civilization can carry on forever, but I mean, it doesn't seem to me to be behaving in a sane way.
Yeah, it won't be forever, but I would say our collapse is probably 100 years out.
Okay. Well, it can come surprisingly quickly.
Well, I'll be dead, so I'll be fine.
Yeah. So basically, we have a whole bunch of atheists, and they don't want to rock the boat because it might, disturb their peace of mind or whatever. So they're not going to say anything. Most of them don't have children, so they don't give a crap about the next generation. And that, I would say, is an attitudinal problem. Wouldn't you say, Vincent?
Perhaps, yes.
So, I mean, that's why people would just kill each other over the same God, over how you think of God. That was why Spinoza was excommunicated from his own Jewish community, because he said he actually denied the Abrahamic God. He only accepted the pantheist God as a universe. But he would still be technically a monotheist, but not an ethical monotheist. And I guess that there is a big.
Hey, Dad.
That there's going to be a big gap between ethical monotheism and mere monotheism. And that's why, I mean, even in Europe, I think, I forget what it was called now, but these European Christians were killing each other about, having the correct beliefs. I mean, it's like they were still Christian, but they had a disagreement about how God should be conceived of. But I think perhaps they weren't fighting over nothing, because you, Vincent, probably think God is illogical and immoral, and obviously.
No, because I'm not a monotheist, so I don't believe God is immoral, because I believe there's more than one. And just because bad things happen in the world doesn't mean that it was all based on one God and like the holy, makings of one being.
Okay, so you prefer to believe in more than one, but you don't have a story for Mr. and Mrs. God and, baby God and son God and
I know, that's
God.
the point. The point is not to have one so that you
can't
don't.
support your story.
I don't need a story. Well, you can't support your story either. I'm going to make up a bunch of nonsense. I've made up a bunch of nonsense. I win.
I'm just relying on the traditional beliefs of, Jews,
which is nonsense. Which is nonsense.
Okay, but they're more than you.
Okay, well, nonsense is worse than nothing, because at least nothing has potential to become something truthful, whereas nonsense doesn't have that potential.
Well, it's not nonsense to think that the ideological battle is between Christianity and Islam. Like I've explained to you, that the 5 religions, most of us are not Jews. Hinduism and Buddhism ain't good enough for even the Asians, let alone the Westerners. And so we're back to Christianity and Islam. And
okay, well, maybe there's something new is going to come. Maybe something new is going to come along.
Claire, shouldn't the new fight be between secularism and religious? Any religion? Shouldn't that be the new fight, that we don't want your religious nonsense governing us?
Well, it should be between social conservatives and the sexually liberated, and then it becomes clear who's who and what's what.
I consider myself a social conservative, but I still want secularism. I don't want religious nonsense. I mean, I don't want your God with your divine revelation telling me what to do. I do think,
You still prefer Congress to make up the rules as it goes along?
Yes, we should make up the rules as we go along.
And Vincent, that's your view too.
No, I believe there's certain natural laws that if you took them away, it's pointless to take them away. It's pointless to say let's all murder each other, because then society would just collapse. It's pointless.
But I mean, the complaint now is that it's not that there is no law against murder and theft. It's that they're not enforced properly or fairly.
They've never been imposed properly or fairly. Never in all history.
Okay, so what the problem is that the people in charge, our ruling classes, are corrupt and incompetent.
But they've always been corrupt. Nothing's going to change that. Islam is not going. Muslim leaders are corrupt and incompetent.
Yes, they are, because they're the dumbos who don't realize that the fact that they are a monarchy means that no Islamic scholar can give his honest opinion about any interpretation of the Quran.
Okay,
because he would fear for his life.
No Muslim state is free from corrupt, incompetent rulers. None of them.
Yes, I agree, but the fact is that the Gulf kingdoms are absolute monarchies. And therefore,
okay, but not all Muslim countries are absolute monarchies, and they're all run by corrupt idiots.
But the point is that the corrupt and crazy people are in charge and have the interpretation of the Quran.
Okay, you can't just go and say your murder theft laws don't work because there's corruption. The rules against murder. Okay, generally in America, you can't just go walking out into the street and murder people. No, I mean, yes, okay, generally in America, if you murder someone, you go to jail for it. very rarely in America do you go into a shopping mall and stab people and you just get off scot-free. That's very rare.
But the point is, people do not feel that the laws are being properly or fairly enforced. So
Okay,
you're
well,
going to get a situation
where's your evidence?
where
Where's
people
your
hate the
evidence?
government.
Where's your evidence that mass murder is not being, on a massive scale, murder is not being prosecuted? Where's your evidence for this?
I'm not saying that it's not being prosecuted, but you know, the expression "getting away with murder" is not one that I created.
Okay, that's very rare. That's very rare. Most people don't get away with murder unless nobody knew who did it. Then, you know, and usually when somebody knows
people in America think the laws are fair enough. That is the question, right?
Okay, well, I think yes.
You think
No murder, no
enough?
theft. No murder, no theft is fair enough.
Okay. So why are you even trying to be a political activist if you think everything's fair enough, everything's hunky dory?
No, well, there's more things than no murder, no theft that you need to fight for.
Like,
but Claire, like within Islam, I don't know if you know the story of the guy who murdered 99 people, and he comes to a monk, a scholar, and he asks him, "Can I go to heaven?" And the scholar says, "No, you killed 99 people." So he kills that guy. And then he goes on and he comes across another scholar, and the Muslim scholar says, "Well, if you repent, right, if you say the Shahada, you can go to heaven." So within Islam, anytime you say the Shahada, you are forgiven all your past sins. So there's not a whole reckoning of sin in misdeed.
really, it's so easy. You just say the Shahada and
You just
it's all
say, yeah.
forgiven.
You got to say the magic words in Arabic, but yeah.
Okay, who said that? Who said that?
Every Muslim you'd ever talk
some Muslim moron, right?
Every Muslim you would ever talk to would say, once you say the Shahada, all your past sins are forgiven.
Claire, I have to step away for a few minutes. I have to go eat.
Okay. So we don't have to believe every sort of stupid shit that they come up with, right?
Right.
I mean, do we have to believe? I mean, it's like, who knows anyway? Who alive knows who gets to heaven anyway?
No one. But the Muslims
well,
claim
exactly. So why do we have to believe
that? Why they say
that
Inshallah, Alhamdulillah, Allahu Akbar. They say all these things, these magic words created.
No, yeah, I know. We don't have to believe their bullshit, do we? You know, we know they're morons, most of them. Most of them are bloody morons.
Absolutely.
So we don't have to take their religion from them.
But you're the one pushing their religion on us.
Yeah, but I'm saying no. The thing is, Mike, you don't care because you have no children. You just don't give a damn. You think Western civilization, as it is now, even as it's leaking away and running down the drain, is enough to keep you for your lifetime. So you don't give a shit. You're not going to say, "Oh, we need changes. It's got to be done for the future of our children." You don't give a shit. And most people I talk to are not married parents, so they don't give a shit either. That explains, the attitude of, well, I'm not going to rock the boat. It's not my children. If I'm not going to have descendants, I actually would prefer it if nobody else gets to have descendants either. So your opinion can be easily discredited.
Because I'm all for rocking the boat.
Well, but no.
I hope my nieces and nephews live long lives and their children live long lives in America where we prosper. I disagree 100% that Islam is some sort of savior for Western society.
Well, what is? But you don't care. You're saying it's okay for Western civilization to go off the edge of the cliff and hit the rocks below. If it's a ship, it can go into the shallows. You don't give a damn. You haven't got a better idea, but it doesn't matter because you don't give a damn. And most people are like you, and they don't give a damn.
Okay. Oh, I see the machine line. It says I'm lying. Machine, jump on, man. Let's talk. I'm 99.999% sure saying the Shahada forgives all past sins in the age of ignorance. So,
well, I've heard it said it's like being born again, right? It's the
right,
same idea.
sure.
Yeah.
Sure. It's the same thing as born again baptism, that your sins are wiped away. But the greater point is, I don't want to live in a society that's governed by Quranic Sharia.
Okay,
Right.
I'm sure that there are lots of people like you, but I mean, there are ways of dealing with you people, really, if people could only organize themselves and say, we are women of childbearing age, we are men of fighting age, and we're going to fight the attitude, the people who have your very unhelpful attitudes. And anyway, you're clearly not thinking in terms of the national interest, only in your personal interest, and therefore your opinions should be dismissed.
All right. Well,
Yes.
that's always an interesting thing. Just dismiss someone's opinion.
Yes, because it's
I'm an American, so
you don't want to
we
get
believe
married. You don't care if people get married, and you don't want to admit that you've been wrong, and you don't want any changes. So I get it, but therefore it means that, but it also has implications for people who could in theory fight it, but they refuse because they're too stupid, right? They're too stupid or too drugged up or into porn to care about any of these things, and they would actually prefer to die childless, and we may actually have a majority of these people, in which case I guess the civilization will die, because how can you carry on with people who don't want to have children? It's
well, it's interesting. So my mother had 5 children. I'm born 7 years and a week away from my oldest sister, and then my oldest brother only had 2 children. My oldest sister only had 1 through in vitro, because she became a lawyer, went to school for too long, and then tried to reproduce, had to get science on her side. My middle brother has 3 children, and my middle sister has 2. So my mom produced 5 kids, and out of that, only got 8 grandchildren. So, but I'm a zero population growth guy. So I think we have too many people on the planet already. 8 billion. I mean, we'll be at 10 billion here pretty soon. I'm not sure how much water we got, how much, pesticide we can use. Look at when Sri Lanka pulled out their pesticides and their crops failed miserably. India's got over 1 billion people. They've overtaken China. I mean, these are countries not much bigger than Texas. I mean, this idea that we need more people is baffling to me. We need less people. We need to grow better foods. There's a guy who wrote a book on nitrogen, fertilizer. Once we run out of nitrogen, right? When Russia attacked Ukraine, there was a whole mess of fertilizer didn't come out of Ukraine and Russia, and people were going to starve to death. I mean,
we won't even starve to death. Who knows? If we get agriculture wrong, it's been known to happen. And,
yeah. So this idea we need. I mean, I remember one time
there could be war, and
I asked a Muslim, how many people do you think could be on the planet? And he said, 100 times what we have now. And I'm like, 1 trillion people. You think the planet can support 1 trillion people? Arable land is not as vast as all land. I mean, you guys with your faith in God, and I don't even know if you're a God believer.
You can actually control the population. You can control the human population quite easily.
Sure. So why am I being childless a bad thing.
No, it's not you being childless, but most people complaining about immigration being childless and only belatedly learning that the reason why these immigrants keep coming is that business organizations have demanded that our government provide them with a labor force that the locals are not able to satisfy. And that's why everybody's complaining about immigration.
Oh, I agree. We need to eliminate welfare. We need to stop paying people to have houses, to feed them and whatnot. You
need to reintroduce
the
slavery.
Mexicans do work that Americans don't want to do. Well, you know why they don't want to do it? Because they're paid not to do it. You got to eliminate that.
So you need to abolish the welfare state.
Absolutely. I'm a Republican. I'm all for that. Yeah.
And maybe the British and the Americans should admit that they should never have abolished slavery, because it was obviously a very useful institution. Because
no, the problem with slavery is they're just like the Mexicans. They're just like the illegal immigrants. They compete for the jobs against the working class. Slavery is very bad. The fall of the Roman Empire, I thought you said that on another stream.
No, I do say, but I mean,
there were too many slaves.
Yeah,
so
too many
commoners
slaves
couldn't compete for work, and you said they had to be entertained, and that's why you had the gladiators tamed and blah blah blah. But yeah, slavery is a bad thing, not just for the slave, but for the working man. They have to compete against free labor.
But obviously you can't have. You still need a working class, so you can't have so many slaves that you make the entire working class of free labor redundant. But Rome, it seems, became a victim of its own success because it acquired so much empire and therefore so many slaves that the influx of slaves basically upset their demographics, and the result of it was that because the working classes felt no longer needed, they didn't have enough children, and even if they did, their children would just not want to join the army, which meant mercenaries had to be recruited, and mercenaries take a long time to do their business and are very expensive.
Sure, and that's why slavery is bad. You push out the working class, the blue collar, as we call them in America. The blue collar class gets pushed out, and they don't have any work. So slavery is bad.
So if you want to maintain your nation, you do need to have your own working class and your own army. The people actually attached to the land, prepared to defend it, and you do need a working class. You can't outsource it, and I think this must be one of the key aspects of nationhood. You are one complete cohesive unit that is actually working on its own, and this, I think, is what's going to make people happier. They don't want to feel that the emperor is far away and will probably never listen to them. And we do live in a global empire, and we don't trust our national leaders, whom we think are incompetent regional managers of an international company. But really, it's about how we feel we're being governed. I mean, yes, all the laws are, we still have an advanced legal system and we can do all kinds of things. It's just that we don't think, we can trust the government to do it properly.
Okay, so I'm 100% against slavery. Do you agree?
The whole point of my humane system of slavery is that that manumission is a right of every slave. So what happens is that the moment you become a slave of the state, an official slave of the state, you'd have an account, and your account would be filled, funded by your work. The government actually owns the slave, and it hires the slaves out to hirers of slave, and the hirers of slave do pay the government, but obviously at a reduced rate. And when the rate of manumission is satisfied, then the slave becomes free, and it should be quite a low thing.
So let's say America implements this system, and we just stay on our hemisphere, right? The Western Hemisphere. We kind of invade Canada, Mexico, all the way to South America, Brazil, blah, blah, blah. And so we have, I don't know, I would assume that's about 1 billion people that we can...
You'd have a proper land empire, the way Trump was going to do it, right? Greenland, Canada, all the way down to Antarctica. That was, I guess, his plan, or wasn't it?
Well, I mean, he keeps saying he wants to buy Greenland or take over Greenland. I think that's for the Northwest Passage, but let's just go from Canada south to, Argentina to Antarctica or whatever. So we enslave all those people. That's going to be a huge number of laborers who aren't being paid. That's one of the cycles of capitalism is you pay into the laborers by, Ford said, I could give cars away if people bought all their parts from me. I could pay my employees enough to buy my cars that then they buy the parts and whatnot within the car, right? That's the circle of economy. But if you put all these non-paid slaves in the economy, it's detrimental to consumption, right?
Well, hoarding wealth is also a problem, and the Quran does tell people not to hoard their wealth because you need to.
What right, but and that's and hoarding wealth is always bad. I agree with you, but putting wealth aside to where you earn interest on the wealth, and then money is lent out at interest, right? You're a non-usury person, right? Didn't I see a comment? Somebody said something about usury. I was like,
it would have to be banned on the secular Quranism, of course.
Yeah, you got to be shitting me. Usury is one of the best things ever. So I put 50. I always tell this to Muslims: watch "It's a Wonderful Life" when Christmas comes around. You understand, when Jimmy Swaggart's saying, "Oh, your money's not in the bank; it's in Frank's roof; it's in Jim's farm." It's when you put money into the bank, and you're given, right now interest rates are low, but if anybody wants to go to raisin.com, you can get 4%. So I'm making 4% on my money in the bank. They're lending it out at, say, 6%, and the bank makes the 2% in between.
Yes, I know that, how it works. But obviously, yes, I know how this would work.
So why are you against interest if you know how it works?
Well, because it means
a beautiful thing.
Well, it's obviously a problem if you're over your heads in debt.
Well, sure, no shit.
And then one day people will stop lending it.
It's problematic. But so, for instance,
it encourages irresponsible borrowing and lending. How many trillions of dollars are you in debt? Is America in debt? How many trillions of dollars?
Oh yeah. Our government's irresponsible. There's no doubt about that. We're 30 trillion in debt. But so, for instance, my parents are just now moving into the old folks' home, right? They bought their house in 1968, the year before I was born, house I grew up in. They paid $18,000, I think, for this house. It'll probably sell for like $500,000. And I remember my mom says, "Oh, my dad's mother came down. It's a 4-bedroom, 3-bath house, 2,500 square feet. Oh, Dickie, his name's Richard, goes by Dick, but Dickie, what did this woman get you into? Their mortgage was like $87 a month. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
They paid it off, obviously, and they're selling the house now. I bought my first house when I was 22 years old. I found a non-qualifying assumable. The mortgage was written in 1984. Only year they did non-qualifying assumables, FHA, that's the Federal Housing Authority, because they had so many defaults in 1 year after it that interest rates were like 13%. I refied my house down in 92 to 9%, right? My mortgage was $333 a month. I had 3 bedrooms, 3 baths. So I rented 2 rooms out to buddies for $150 a month. I was paying like $33 to buy my house. Okay. Without interest, I would have just paid rent. I mean, I owned a 9-unit apartment building. I owned a 4-plex. Worst thing you can ever do is pay rent. You build no equity. You know. So this idea that interest is bad is just so baffling to me. And so I would like you to defend.
It won't be baffling if you get yourself over your head in debt and have yourself and with the consequences.
Well, that's your own stupidity.
Slavery.
That's your own stupidity.
Yeah, a lot of people are stupid and they need to be protected from their own stupidity.
So the rest of us
you're just in a fortunate position of not being in debt and paying.
So the rest of us should be
to service your loans.
Okay. So if I want to buy, I'm 20 years old. I want to buy a house. I don't have $100,000 or $400,000 now in cash to do it, but I could take out a mortgage and pay rent to my mortgage, which actually builds me equity, but I can't do it because you motherfuckers are stupid. So there
are ways of getting an Islamic mortgage.
Okay, explain it to me. Explain it to me.
No. Actually, you can look it up, and clearly, well, I've been at this for over 2 hours now. But there's the websites that explain, Mubahara, Mudaraba, all kinds of Islamic instruments about.
Yeah, it's interesting. Is what it is. I was literally at the Islamic Society of St. Pete one time. Hassan Shibli was talking. He was the correct director of CAIR in Florida, CAIR, Council of American Islamic Relations. But anyways, the sponsorship was a Islamic bank. They had a little table outside. And I said, "Oh, explain this to me." And they said, "Well, let's say you want to buy a house that's $300,000. We'll give you $300,000, and then you pay us back $400,000 over this many years." So I just started laughing. It's the same fucking thing as interest. I mean, they just call it by another name.
Yes, I mean, you don't expect them to do it for you for free, do you? They're
no,
not
not at all.
Stupid.
But just call it fucking interest.
No, because it's calculated in a different way.
Well,
they're saying we're going to make a profit out of it, and we're going to make, at least you know how much you'll be paying.
Sure. In any standard interest.
You just want it to be predictable. You just want it to be predictable, so you can plan your life around that,
right.
Your payments or whatever.
Okay, so you're confusing like simple interest versus compounded interest versus like an an adjustable rate mortgage. Most mortgages are set, right? When I bought my first house, I had to pay this much over this many years, or I could pay it off early, right? Often there's no penalty for early payment.
But now there is.
Well, that can be written into the contract. There
Yeah,
can be
it's
ability
just
for
so
underpayment.
confusing that people feel that they're being ripped
It's not
off.
the least bit confusing. You have to be a moron to be confused by interest.
Well, I guess most people are morons. And they
All right.
feel that they've had their, fingers burned by. I mean, it's just not
Right.
just
So,
not about mortgages.
so
People feel that the government is out to rip them off. They don't feel trust in their government, and obviously this is a problem. It's a problem for the government too.
so you don't think it's a good thing that people who have money put it in the bank, earn interest, well then the bank lends that money out so people can build things? I mean, even just
Well, I mean, you
government
can do
bonds.
this under
I
you
mean,
can do this under Islamic
yeah.
rules.
It's all smoke and mirrors. They call it non-interest, but it is literally interest.
Okay, the only way to show people that you're not going to be you've learned your lesson is to give up usury. I mean that's the only way to show that you've learned your lesson, and maybe people will trust you again. But if you just carry on before as if nothing ever happened, then I guess the government is not going to restore the people's trust in them if they ever had it.
I have total trust in usury.
Okay.
Fuck Islam and your non-usury bullshit.
Okay.
I love usury. I love my interest. I make 4% of my money in the bank right now. I want to continue to make that. That's 2% over inflation. I mean, your system is so nutty, it's ridiculous. Should stocks be able to pay dividends?
Well, yes.
Okay. How is that not interest? What if
I don't know how it's who knows how these dividends are calculated. As long as, but I'm happy to admit that I'm, not an expert on Islamic finance. I will leave it to the experts. I'm saying, under secular Quranism, usury would be banned. And since you hate Islam, of course, you're going to be finding all kinds of reasons not to do it. But I think for the majority of people, they would welcome the significant drop in property prices so they can buy their own homes that you were fortunate enough to do, and they are unfortunate enough not to be able to do.
Well, the irony is, to make housing more affordable is we need to raise interest rates. We've made money too cheap, and that's why housing is so expensive. But also you have supply and demand and all these other market forces on housing.
Well, nobody has any money now, so I don't know how it would help to raise interest rates. You just need to rebase your currency and just let everything, fall to the ground, and then for the value to be slowly.
Well, somebody
rebuilt.
must have some money because people are still buying houses at $500,000 a pop.
Probably foreigners.
That could
The
be
super rich.
It
or
could be all
BlackRock.
Arabs from the Gulf states. Who knows?
Certainly not the locals. And then there'll be more complaints about foreigners again.
Well, I don't know. My one niece just bought her first condo for $350,000 in Orlando. Little 2-1. So
with a mortgage.
Yes, she did a mortgage, no doubt. But she's a veterinarian. She makes $120,000 a year, so she'll be all right.
All right. Well, I think I'll.
Oh, the machine line says what? Sitting money is losing value because of interest and usury. No, inflation's only a little over 2%. My money's only earning 4%. So I'm making 2%.
What about inflation?
Well, that's what I just said. Inflation's 2%. I'm getting 4% on my money. So I'm making. It
sounds 2%. Like it's much more than 2%, surely.
No. Inflation's like 2.3, maybe 2.1. Google
inflation in the U.S.
Yeah. It's just barely over what the Fed. The Fed always wants it at 2%.
That sounds very low. It sounds improbably low from the way Americans are complaining about no longer being able to do anything.
Well, it got up to like 8% under Biden. That's when people were bitching and moaning, which they should. But it's come back down. Did you Google it?
Yeah, it does say it's around that. But
Okay.
I mean, I do hear about the figures being rigged, and obviously, you know, how happy you are depends on whether you're a creditor or a debtor.
Yeah. Always be a creditor.
Hmm.
Borrower, lender, be a lender. Oh, my financial
All right.
advisor is calling me right now.
Okay, I'll let you take your call and end the stream.
All right, you have a good one.
You too.
Hey, Alex, what's up?